Bonnie, her stamina drained from running, turned to whiskey for strength to go on. From letters to relatives, we learned they knew the end was near. Clyde vowed he would never be taken alive. There are many conflicting versions of the last hours of Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker. We tell it now in the words of the one man to tell it the way it was, Captain Frank Hamer. The trail always led back to Louisiana. Barrow was hot in Texas and Missouri. He had killed no one in Louisiana. I had valuable sources of information, which every successful officer must have. All criminals who work in groups must have some way of communicating with one another when they get separated. I learned that Clyde had his post office on a side road about 8 miles from Gibbsland, Louisiana. The point selected was on a small hill from which Bonnie, in the car, would command a view of the road while Clyde went into the piney woods for his mail. As the net closed, I requested a companion, a friend, who'd served with me for many years. So, by the night of May 22, we had good reason to believe that Clyde and Bonnie would visit their mailbox within a short time. I had made contact with Sheriff Henderson Jordan and his deputy Oakley in Bienville Parish, Louisiana. Bob Alcorn and Ted Hinton from the Sheriff's Department of Dallas were members of a party that would take Barrow and the woman. About midnight, we drove out of Gibbsland, hid our cars in the piney woods, and made arrangements to finally capture the bandits. We constructed a blind from pine branches within about 25 feet of the point where the car would stop. The men were spaced at intervals of about 10 feet, parallel to the road. We were to take Barrow and the woman alive if we could. With everything ready, we had nothing to do but wait about 7 hours without breakfast or coffee. Waiting is the hardest thing an officer has to do.
He told his men that morning when they were out there in the woods awaiting that they would be back in a little while if everything went right. And he said, now if any of you men, said there might be some of us that'll bite the dust, but said if any of you men want to back out, now's the time to do it. And I'll think nothing about it. Said, I won't think less of you, that's what he said. And said he knew that Manny Galt wouldn't back out. He knew that Manny would stay by him through thick and thin, you know. But he wanted to give them all a chance and said every one of them to the man stayed, said they wouldn't think about leaving.
As daylight came, a few cars passed and occasionally a logger's truck. It was about 10 minutes after 9 when we heard a humming through the pines that was different from that made by the other motors. A car was coming from the north at high speed, singing like a sewing machine. We heard it when it must have been 3 miles away. When Barrow brought the car to a standstill, he pressed the clutch and slipped into low gear with the engine still idling. And just as we had figured, both he and the woman peered with all their attention toward the stump. I stepped from the bushes and commanded Barrow to surrender. Instead of obeying the order as I had hoped and prayed, they grabbed for their weapons, and all hope for a capture alive perished.
somewhere along the line something went wrong in their minds, of course, that made them such outlaws and made them have such a feeling toward the law, because they wanted something for nothing, and that they knew that the officers stood for what was right.
Clyde Barrow was absolute paranoid, and Bonnie was, if anything, worse.
But she told me if I dared move, or if I got out of that car, she'd shoot me in the back and kill me, and for me to stay put.
But when I read about all the people they killed and in cold blood, I felt different towards Captain Hamer.
But that shows his hate just immediately. It didn't matter whether they were after us or what, that they were just officers of the law standing for what was right, and that they were going to just mow them down regardless whether they had done anything or not. Now, those officers weren't doing a thing but doing the duty and looking for us, but they were going to kill them. If they had turned around, they were going to just shoot them. He said, we're not going to wait for anything. If they come back, we're just going to kill the officers. And that showed their thinking. It was so warped.
Examination proved the car was an arsenal.